Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we decode the world of business, starting with a company that is digging deep, possibly for gold and maybe even antimony. More on that later. You know, sometimes corporate filings are a bit like a treasure map. They show you where the jewels might be, but also where the dragons are guarding them. Today, we're going on a bit of an expedition with Nova Minerals Limited, looking at their latest annual report. Stick around, because this story has layers from big financial shifts to ambitious expansion plans, and even a dash of global geopolitical strategy. And hey, if you appreciate getting straight insights from these sometimes dense documents, make sure you're subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below where we dive into these topics further, so join us there. Alright, so we're re-looking at Nova Minerals Limited, and this report covers their fiscal year ending the 30th of June 2025. Now first things first, they are in the mining exploration business, and they representing their financial statements in Australian dollars, or ASD. But for us US folks, they also provide some US dollar conversions, which is handy. They re-dual, listed on both the Australian Stock Exchange, or ASX, and the Nasdaq Capital Market in the US under the ticker NVA for their American Depository Shares, or ADS. The big news here is their financial performance. Now, as an exploration company, they don't have a lot of revenue from actual mining yet. So instead of looking at sales, we're going to focus on their cash position, their expenses, and frankly, how much money they re-pouring into exploring their projects. Let's talk about their balance sheet first. As of the 30th of June 2025, their total assets were $112,542,132. That is up a bit from $107,246,021 the year before. A big chunk of that, over $100 million, is tied up in exploration and evaluation costs. This is where they re-spending their money, hoping to find valuable resources. Now, look at their cash. It jumped up to a $9,374,817 from a $3,478,703 the year prior. That is a pretty significant increase of 169%. This boost likely comes from the money they raised through public offerings, which we get to. On the flip side, their liabilities have decreased substantially. Non-current liabilities went from over a $5.6 million down to zero. This is mainly because a convertible loan they had was converted into ordinary shares, which is generally good news, freeing them from that debt. Okay, the income statement, this is where we see the reality of an exploration company. For the year ending the 30th of June 2025, they reported a loss of $11,099,171. That is actually an improvement from the loss of a $16,389,292 in the previous year. So they losing less money, which is a positive trend. The big reason for that reduced loss: a gain of over $6.9 million from selling their investment in Snow Lake Resources. They also had a swing from a loss to a gain related to share-based payments. When we look at cash flow, this is where the rubber meets the road. They used a $7,640,379 in operating activities for the year ending the 30th of June 2025. This is more than the $3,666,768 they used in the prior year. This increase is largely due to higher administrative costs, especially those tied to their US listing and marketing efforts, plus more consulting fees for things like antimony grant applications and mine engineering studies. It is a lot of spending, but it is tied to their strategy. Investing activities show a positive cash flow of over $4.1 million this year, a big turnaround from the $13.3 million they used in investing activities last year. This is mostly because they sold their investment in Snow Lake Resources, bringing in a nice chunk of cash. Financing activities brought in a $9,793,856 this year, a huge jump from just under a $1 million last year. This is mainly from the proceeds of their public offerings in July and September of 2024, and also from warrants being exercised. This tells us they successfully raising capital from investors. Now, what is the story behind these numbers? Nova Minerals is really focused on their Estelle project in Alaska. They're not just looking for gold, which is pretty standard for a mining company, but also antimony, which is considered a critical mineral for the US economy and national security. This is especially relevant because China, a major producer of antimony, has recently restricted exports. Nova is actively seeking grants from the US Department of Defense to potentially fast-track developing antimony production at Estelle. This move shows a strategic understanding of global supply chains and a playbook to play into that. They have a timeline for getting this project into production, aiming for a high-grade RPM starter mine, possibly by 2027. Then they envision an expanded project involving multiple deposits, and potentially even that standalone antimony, gold starter mine, possibly by 2026, depending heavily on securing those US Department of Defense grants. It is an ambitious plan with clear milestones, but also a lot of ifs, especially when it comes to government funding and approvals. Of course, with exploration and resource development, there are always big risks. The report highlights that their mineral reserves could be lower than expected, and they currently only have identified resources, not confirmed reserves for gold. There is no guarantee they'll find economically viable quantities of minerals, and that is a fundamental risk for any mining explorer. They have no history of producing metals, and the market prices for gold and antimony are always a concern. They also mention needing additional financing to continue their efforts, and the potential for shareholder dilution if they issue more shares. The mention of needing US Department of Defense grants to develop their antimony gold strategy is a really interesting point. It shows they are trying to align their business with national strategic interests, which could indeed expedite their plans if successful, but it also introduces a significant dependency on external government decisions. Looking at their compensation, it is standard for a company at this stage: salaries, some share-based payments, and performance rights. These performance rights tie executive compensation to specific milestones like completing feasibility studies or achieving certain production and financial targets. It's a way to align management's interests with shareholder value, assuming those milestones are met. Financially, in 2025, they spent about $410,000 on audit fees with Grassi and Company CPAs PC and $123,000 with RSM Australia partners for their Australian audits. These are substantial but not out of line for a company of this size, listing on multiple exchanges. So, what is the verdict on Nova Minerals? They in a high-risk, high-reward business. Their Estelle project has significant potential, boasting both gold resources and promising antimony discoveries in a stable jurisdiction. The fact that they're moving towards development and actively seeking strategic partnerships, including government grants for critical minerals, is a strong move. However, the inherent risks of exploration, the need for continuous funding, and the dependence on government grants for their antimony strategy are considerable hurdles. They're showing progress in managing their losses and raising capital, which is positive, but investors should be aware that the road to profitability is still long and uncertain. They are definitely showing a clear strategy to tap into the demand for both gold and critical minerals, which is a smart play in today's market. Alright, that is our breakdown of Nova Minerals' latest filings. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Do you think they can strike gold and become a key player in the US antimony supply chain? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of corporate finance. And don't forget to check out the Discord in the description to continue the conversation. Thanks for watching. See you next time.